Hello guys and gals and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be taking a look at another unique item, which is the Blueflame Bracers. The Blueflame Bracers is a interesting piece of equipment that's going to allow you to convert all your fire damage into cold damage, which is really neat. And it's going to allow you to utilize, like fire spells to make ice spells. Like you can have fireballs that shoot ice and things like that. It's pretty darn cool. Let's go over the ability. The bracers themselves, and then we'll talk about the bracers and what you can potentially do with them. So first off, they do have the armor energy shield bonus, and they are level 33 with a 30 strength, 30 intelligence. They do give you 20 intelligence, which is a pretty hefty amount, up to 20 intelligence. They have 5 to 15% fire resistance, 5 to 15% cold resistance, and then they have the meat and potatoes effect, which is 100% of fire damage is converted into cold damage. So if you look at an ability and you pull up the extra panel, you can see that, for instance, I'm doing cold damage, 7,968 cold damage, and I'm doing 1,999 fire, right? 1,099 fire. If I use these gloves, you'll notice the fire disappears, and all of a sudden now I'm doing cold damage explicitly. So I have converted my fire into cold, which is going to be really nice. I'm also dishing out lightning damage too, and we'll talk about why that's important in the future. But for the time being now, I have all of my fire damage is now converted into cold. Now this is both a positive and a negative. This means that my fire damage is now gone. So I am now no longer dishing out fire damage, and I can no longer ignite things. However, now my fire damage is instead freezing things, which is very, very effective. When you're utilizing an item like this, any spell or any ability that you have that would potentially be fire is now cold. Take, for instance, Solar Orb as an example, which is a fire damage ability, and it also contains an Ignite, which does fire damage as well. The fire damage is also converted into cold, and so is the Ignite converted into cold. Now there's a problem with this though. You can't actually ignite monsters if you don't deal fire damage. And this is an issue. You will still freeze targets, of course, because you're still dealing cold damage. However, if you want to ignite targets, the only way that I am aware of, if you're utilizing this this pair of gloves, is to utilize the Three Dragons helmet. The Three Dragons helmet is going to convert all of your elemental bonuses, essentially, into other elemental bonuses as far as what they're capable of dishing out for ailments. So in the case of fire, it's going to convert all fire into shock chance from Ignite. In the case of cold, it converts all of your freeze chance into ignite chance. And in the case of lightning, it converts all of your lightning shock chance into freeze chance. So in this particular case, because I am dishing out a relatively large amount of lightning, I'll still be able to freeze because my lightning is now going to freeze. However, I will not be able to shock, but I will be able to make monsters burn with the cold damage. Yes, I'm going to burn them with cold damage. And as an example, let's go ahead and utilize the Solar Orb ability, which I don't have on my bar. And we're going to see if we can see this in action. So we're going to ignite some monsters. So these guys are currently ignited, and they are currently burning, but they're not burning with fire. They're actually burning with cold damage, which is kind of silly when you think about it. So I'm burning them with cold. It's so cold that it burns. Now, if I utilize one of my regular abilities, I'll still be able to freeze targets because I'm dishing out lightning damage with this particular helmet, because, of course, lightning damage still allows me to freeze targets. However, if I were to remove all the lightning damage from my character, in this particular case, if I am dishing out pure fire damage, then I will no longer be able to ignite things. I can only freeze them. In the case of Solar Orb is only fire. So as you can see, I'm no longer freezing targets because it doesn't freeze things anymore. Now it just ignites. However, if I were to take this mask off, Solar Orb would be able to freeze him. And of course, he runs away from my Solar Orb. Stand there and burn, you turd. As you can see, his freeze meter is building up with each hit of the orb, but he's no longer burning. So it really comes down to, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to achieve the freezing effect, or do you want to achieve the burning effect? And this is kind of a big downside for certain abilities, and it's something that we do have to talk about when it comes to this particular item, is that if you are utilizing this particular pair of gloves to convert all of your fire into cold, It's important to note that some abilities are designed around the ability to ignite and dish out extra damage through the ignition of monsters. And so if you have an ability like Solar Orb, which was designed specifically around the ability to ignite monsters, and seems to have the majority of its damage offloaded into the ignite. As you can see, it only does 40 to 61 fire damage per pulse, but it does 193 to 290 fire damage on its ignite, right? So this ability was designed around the general purpose of igniting things and lighting them on fire. So it's a very poor ability to utilize when it comes to these pair of gloves, because now you're not getting the damage that you want. You're not getting the ignite, which was how the ability was designed. So when you think about it that way, you kind of have to take into account the fact that you're going to be losing that ignite and also losing the damage that would potentially be with that skill. This is one way that you could potentially get that back, though, if you're willing to sacrifice your freezes. Now, you can potentially still get your freeze effect through lightning damage, which is kind of interesting. Although you no longer have fire damage at all, you can still potentially use lightning spells to get the freezing effect, which is, I know, very silly, but it does in fact work. I think that's pretty much it for this pair of gloves. I'm very impressed with a lot of these conversion items because they do open up a lot of options for characters, like spell-wise, to be able to get very interesting effects. Like, for instance, I mean, let's just go over some of the options real quick, because why not? Let me pull up a skill gem here. And as an example, let's go over the elemental tree. You can make firewalls that freeze targets. You could make ember fuselages that freeze targets. You could make incinerate, solar orb, fireball, firestorm, and flame blast. All can be made to freeze targets, which is absolutely amazing, right? On top of this, there's also Detonate Dead, which is a fire ability, which could potentially be turned into a cold ability in this particular regard. So that is another option. And I'm not entirely sure it wouldn't be fun to use this on a Mace class character either. Mace class characters have a lot of fire abilities. You have obviously like the... I'm trying to remember here, like which ones are fire specifically and which ones, yeah. So like the Perfect Strike is 40% conversion to fire, so that's one there. Molten Blast is 60% conversion to fire, so you could potentially turn Molten Blast into an ice ability utilizing these gloves, and then you could freeze targets with them, which is really nice. The Shrapnel is also 100% conversion into fire, so that one would also 100% convert into cold. The Volcanic Fissure is also 60% physical damage to fire, so you would get a huge amount of cold damage there. And you could freeze targets with that, obviously. The options for this are kind of limitless, honestly, because even as a melee character or a ranged character, you can stack elements on your weapons. Like you see my crossbow here has 2 to 121 lightning damage. Well, let's say, for instance, I wanted to get a massive amount of cold damage on a bow. Well, I could potentially utilize items that convert all elements to cold and get the bonus that way. Like, for instance, if I found a bow that had, say, the highest tier of fire damage on it, the highest tier of lightning damage on it, and the highest tier of cold damage on it, I could potentially convert the fire and the lightning into cold, giving myself a triple dose, essentially, of lightning, of cold damage. To show you how this would work, it would probably involve something... Oh, I got booted. It would probably involve something like this. And let me see if I can hop back in. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter all that much. But basically, it would work something like... this is my other one from the passives. But let's say, for instance, you had, I don't know, 1 to 122 damage, right, in lightning. And that's a pretty nice amount of lightning damage, right? And then let's say you also had a pretty decent amount of fire. Like, fire is probably going to be more like 40 to like 80 or something like that. And then your cold damage is going to be something like 20 to like 50. And what you could do is you could convert all of these by utilizing the various items into cold. So your lightning now becomes cold. So it transfers over to cold. Your fire now transfers over to cold, right? And now you have 3 different abilities essentially that are all processing as cold damage. So you would just add them all up, and now you have a massive amount of cold damage on your weapon. This is another way that you could potentially utilize it to your advantage. And just to give you an idea, it would be, say, like 1, 2, 40. Hold on, let's just do the top end. So we'll do 122 plus 80. Actually, average would probably be better. Let's do average because they're all different averages. So let's do 122 plus 1. And then we divide that by 2, and we get an average of 61.5. And then we have our like 40 to 80, so 40, plus 80 divided by 2, which is like an average of 60. They're probably going to be all around the same like average, but the cold damage isn't because I messed it up. But 20 plus 50 equals 70 divided by 2, so now we're at like 35. And you're going to convert all of them together. So now we have like 61 plus 60 plus 35, and you get like an average cold damage of like 156, because you could potentially convert all of the elements into cold if you wanted to, and dish out only purely cold damage, and then go for tons of cold modifiers and multipliers and things that you could potentially use. So there's definitely some interesting connotations there. In fact, we could even take a look on the trade website. And we could take a brief look at a crossbow, just as an example. So let's take a look at a crossbow. And is there just like a reset button? Let's clear. So let's do crossbow, and then we're just going to do the 3 element types. So let's see if we can find a crossbow that has the 3 element types on it, and then like how high they could potentially go. So we're looking for adds lightning damage, adds fire damage, and adds cold damage. And then let's do like some minimums on these. So let's do, I don't know, like 30 and 30. And this one, of course, is like, let's do like 2, because lightning has such a low modifier on it. And as you can see there, you can get some pretty crazy ones, right? So like we got elemental DPS. Let's arrange by elemental DPS. And right off the bat, we have a 64 to 96 fire, 57 to 78 cold, 2 to 83 lightning. So we have a crossbow here, which it has all the elements on it. And it is something that you could convert. So going back online, since we seem to have reconnected, I don't know what the hell happened. Yeah, there we go. So if we were to do this correctly, you would probably be wearing the Blueflame Bracers to convert 100% fire into cold. And then you would also be utilizing something like the Call of Topaz ring, which is going to convert 100% of lightning into cold. And this means that you would be converting everything into cold damage. So you would have primarily 100% cold damage, but you would be converting all of that lightning damage from your weapon into cold, all the fire damage from your weapon into cold, all the lightning or fire damage that you have on rings into that particular element, and it could be a very fun build. I could imagine there could be some pretty interesting connotations for that, especially considering you can get, what is it, up to 3 prefixes on a specific item. So looking for rings that have all elements on them, you would look for a ring that has all elements. You would look for a bow that has all elements of damage, and then you would wear these 2 items together to convert all of those elements into one. It's definitely an interesting option for sure. I think that's pretty much it for this particular pair of gloves. There's a lot of fun things that you can do with these conversions, and I hope you guys are having fun, thinking about the potential options. As always, be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button. The flavor text on this says the secret was lost with its maker. and keep watching.